on this episode of Building Men, the skunk in the basement and the hole in the wall. Welcome to the Building Men podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Meralda. Building Men is geared toward helping you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So here's the story. This goes back about 6 years, maybe 7 years. Moved into a new house. We got a new dog, a little Boston Terrier named Bo. One of the first nights we had Bo back at the house, he was in a crate in the kitchen near a vent, and he was going crazy. Would not stop barking. And, we tried to, give him some love and attention. It's going to be okay, buddy, this and that. It wouldn't stop. And so we brought Bo into the bedroom, and he stayed in the bedroom that night in a crate. And I don't know if it was the right thing to do or not with the crate training of the dog. I'm not quite sure. I'm not a dog expert. But the next morning, I woke up ready to go to work as a middle school principal down in South Jersey, and there was this smell, this odd smell in the house, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. It wasn't a smell that I think I've smelled before. And so I opened up the basement door, and the smell was strong, like really, really strong. So I was like, oh, geez, like there's a dead animal in the basement. Like it had to be something dead down there. Like the smell was just it was nasty. So I go down the basement steps, and I'm looking around, and then I see poop, like animal poop on the floor in the basement. Now, mind you, the basement in this house was a scary basement. I'll put it that way. And then maybe that's putting it pleasantly that it was a scary basement. There were electrical issues in the basement, so there was maybe one or two kind of flickering lights down there. Decent sized basement, and it had a long crawl space that went back, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 feet. And so now I'm down the basement, and I'm looking around for the smell, and I see poop on the ground. And now I'm like, there is a dead animal down here. And as I'm thinking that, I hear this shuffling to my right, and I look over, and that's when I see it. There's a live skunk in the basement of my house. And so I slowly back up, walk up the basement steps without causing any kind of commotion to disturb the wild beast as it looked at me, ready to spray. So now I'm like, first of all, I have to call out of work. I'm just starting a new job as a middle school principal in South Jersey. I have to call out of work. I can't go into work. I can't leave my family here with the live skunk in the basement. And so now it's like this smell in the house, right? It was horrible. I recognize that that's what the dog was going nuts about the night before, was that skunk was probably somewhere, in a proximity where maybe the dog smelled it or heard it, or maybe it was in the vent system. Who knows? So to get rid of the smell of skunk in there, supposedly you're supposed to boil vinegar. That's another nice smell, the smell of boiling vinegar. So not only do we have this smell of skunk and poop in the basement, but now there's this boiling vinegar that we have to deal with. Family leaves the house, and now it's up to me to figure out this issue that's in front of me. All right, so there's a skunk in the basement. And so the first thought is, okay, I'm going to call animal control. Obviously, you call animal control. There's a live, animal in the basement that, it's this animal that can really cause some big problems in a house, right? So I call animal control. Well, here's the thing about animal control. Unless you hit it at the exact right time, you're not going to get animal control out to the house. So pretty much it's like the third Tuesday of every month from 11 to 11:20. They're available to come out and help you out with the situation. Now, I'm sure all the good people in animal control, this is not your fault. It's probably a funding issue or something like that. But now I'm dealing with a skunk in the basement, and I have to figure this out. So now I start looking around, like I look online, like, okay, there's got to be some, some people that can help out in this situation, right? So I called a couple numbers. The first guy that gets back to me, let's call him Ranger Rick. So Ranger Rick gets back to me and he says, "All right, tell me about the situation." So I'm going through the situation with Ranger Rick. Okay, it was in the basement. I saw the poop. It was, it was kind of off to the side. He said, "Well, obviously it's sick. It's during the daytime. A skunk should not be in your basement, and it shouldn't be. They're nocturnal animals, so it shouldn't be up and about right now." So he also says, "Well, tell me a little bit more about the house." He says, "Is it what's going on in the basement?" I told him there's a crawl space. And he said, "Well," he said, "you might have like a whole family of skunk in your basement." And so now the situation went from bad to a little bit worse for me. So I said, "Okay, well, how quickly can you get out to my house to help me out with this skunk problem that I'm now faced with in my life?" He says, "I'll be there in, say, an hour or so." And so now I'm just like preparing myself for this situation. So in my mind, the guy's going to come out to the house, he'll take care of the skunk problem, and we'll move on from there. I'll have to deal with the smell in the house for a little bit, but it is what it is. Worst things have happened, right? So he gets there, he brings out his truck, and he takes his cage out and this special blanket and it's like this prodding tool that he had. And he starts talking to me. And so Ranger Rick is like, "All right, so here's our plan. We're gonna go down into the basement. We'll assess the situation, and we'll entice the skunk into the cage. We'll use some bait to get it into the cage. And once it's in the cage, what we're going to do is we're going to cover the cage with this blanket. And once the skunk is in the cage with the blanket covering it, it won't spray because it doesn't want to get the spray in itself. And if it's in this enclosed situation, that's pretty much what will happen." And so as I'm listening to Ranger Rick talk, I notice when he's speaking about this situation, he's not using the word I, he's using the word we. And so then it hit me, I'm a part of this process now. I'm now a part of this skunk removal process in the basement. So now I'll be in the basement with Ranger Rick. And I was like, "All right, Chief, like, why do I have to be a part of this?" And he says, "Well, it's kind of like a two-man operation here." And like, truth be told, Ranger Rick wasn't the most expensive animal trapper out there, so maybe part of it, the discounted rate that I got, was you have to be a part of the skunk removal process. All right, so now Ranger Rick is there. We head down into the basement, and this part of the story is kind of anticlimactic. We were able to get the skunk into the crate. I was able to cover it really quickly with the blanket. It didn't spray. He takes the skunk out of the basement in the crate, and I'm thinking, all right, this is great. Problem solved. Ranger Rick, pay him your money, and we'll head on from here. We'll deal with the smell in the basement. But that's when the story takes a little bit of a turn. So now Ranger Rick goes to me, "All right, so now what you have to do is you have to get up into that crawl space because there's definitely some kind of a hole in your crawl space, an underground path that led the skunk into your basement. The skunk must have gotten in some way. So basically, he said there was probably some groundhog hole, and the skunk got lost and it's found its way into your basement. It couldn't get back out. So you're going to have to go there, identify where the hole is in the basement wall, and what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to patch it up." And so now is where the story begins. This is where I wanted to kind of talk about this idea of the skunk in the basement and the hole in the wall. So now it hits me. My responsibility as the man of the house is to get into this crawl space where there may or may not be other animals lurking, and find a way to, one, identify a hole in the wall, and then two, to patch up the hole in the wall. First thing I do is I go out and I buy cement. I buy all the materials that I need. So I have all this stuff ready to go. I have bricks and broken up pieces of cinder block and just materials that I could kind of stuff into this hole in the wall. And I'm pretty much put on every article of clothing that I own. And I have this moment of panic, and I'm like, one, I don't like the crawl space. It's really scary, and I'm scared of whatever's back there. It's dark, it's creepy, and there's a hole, and there could be anything in this damn hole. and I'm going to have to find it and patch it up and hopefully not get eaten by a group of skunk, whatever you would call like a large group of skunk. I'm not quite sure what the official name for them are, or what if there are other things out there? What if there's like raccoon or like who knows what else could have gotten into this crawl space now? So now I'm wearing 37 pieces of clothing, and I brought my son down with me. So my son Denny is now 15 years old at the time, so you're going back 6 years. He was 9 maybe. So I have a flashlight and Denny has a flashlight. And so I crawl up, it's like 3 or 4 feet to get into the crawl space. And now I'm crawling on my hands and my knees, petrified. I go back maybe 15 feet and there's just like this little corner that I had to turn, and I shine the flashlight and I see where the skunk got in. So I see this hole. And I'm like, all right, then keep the flashlight there. I think he might have even been holding a baseball bat as well, just in case. And I told him, hey, listen, if I don't make it out of here alive, make sure that you tell my story that I was brave. And I crawled into the crawl space and I tried to fill in this hole in the wall to save our family. So now I'm back in the crawl space. I have like a Maglite flashlight and I see the hole. There's no animals that come out. I am profusely sweating, just sweating my ass off. My hands are shaking a little bit, and I just start slopping concrete or mixing their concrete and like putting stuff in the wall like to try to like secure this area. And maybe the hole is the size of a basketball, but I'm like stuffing it with as much shit as I can possibly find. And as I'm doing this, my flashlight drops out of my hand and breaks. So now it's pitch black where I am. I'm around the corner, and so Denny's flashlight isn't really reaching me. I'm around the corner, sweating. I'm probably crying at this moment. I'm probably crying, and I got as much of the stuff in the wall as I can, and I had to crawl back to where my son was, and I just said, Den, just keep the flashlight on me. The good news is that I survived this ordeal. And the better news is, as I was thinking back on this situation with the skunk in the basement and the hole in the wall, I was like, how can I tell this story in a way that would make sense on a Building Men podcast, right? And so here's where I'm going to kind of make the connection. There's going to be these things in your life that you will come across that just suck. Like, you're going to have to do whatever it is. There's something that's going to come up that you're not looking forward to doing, and that you're dreading. Like, I have no interest in doing whatever it is that's in front of you. And there's a couple things you could totally avoid a situation. You can say, you know what, I'm going to turn my head, I'm going to stick my head in the sand, I'm not going to deal with it. But what happens there is when you turn your head and when you don't deal with situations like that, they tend to get worse. So if there's something that's happening that's really bad in your life, or something that you just have to like kind of suck it up and go through, if you let it be and you're just like, you know what, if I push it to the side, it might go away, or I'll let future Dennis deal with that problem, it tends to get worse. So in this situation, if I were to say, you know what, I'm gonna let that hole in the wall be. I'm gonna let that hole. I'm not gonna get up there, and I'm not going to, brave the crazy, scary crawl space and patch up this hole in the wall. I could have gotten more skunk in the basement. I could have gotten other animals in the basement. I mean, who knows? I mean, I could be telling the story and there's like an alligator down there or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is that when things like that come up, instead of turning your back to them, knowing that this was going to suck, sometimes you just have to say, you know what, I'm going to go through this shitty thing that's in front of me. Like, I'm recognizing like this was going to scare me. I had no interest in doing it. But sometimes you have to, deal with the skunk in the basement and patch up the hole in the wall. Here's the other larger life lesson I'll connect to this story. There will be problems that you face in your life that you might just try to do the bare minimum to fix the problem. So say I'm like, you know what, there's a smell in the basement. I'll stuff a couple towels under the door, not deal with it. Or maybe I say, all right, there's something down in the basement. I'm going to wait for animal control to get here. So I'll patiently wait for that third Tuesday at 11:05 for animal control to get to the house. Or maybe I would say, all right, Ranger Rick, I'm a busy man. I can't help you out. Do your best down there. and maybe the skunk sprays Ranger Rick. I might have said, okay, we got the skunk out of the basement, but you know what? I'm not getting up into that crawl space. There's no freaking way that I am crawling into a crawl space and patching up a hole. But here's the thing with this story. The problem wasn't the skunk. The problem wasn't Ranger Rick. The problem wasn't me helping. The problem wasn't the smell. The problem was the hole in the wall. And unless I sucked it up and dealt with what the problem was, the skunk got down there because there was a hole. So I needed to really face it and say, this is the main problem here. Figure out how to fix it. Think about your own life. Like maybe there are these situations that are very surface level that you're like, all right, I can fix, maybe I lose 5 pounds. Maybe it's I'm going to stop drinking this weekend. Maybe it's I'm going to stop buffering in whatever way, shape, or form. But the story is that you have to figure out why you're doing those things. What's the underlying cause? What's the root of the problem that you're experiencing in your personal life, your mental health, your relationships that you're having with other people? Like, what is the hole in the wall? What is the thing that's causing whatever those problems are? Unless you have the courage to get up into the crawl space and figure out how to fix that problem, there's going to be skunks that are going to keep coming into the basement. They'll keep getting in and they will keep wreaking havoc on your life and spraying people, and you're going to have to deal with Ranger Rick on a frequent basis. Figure out what that hole in the wall is, and how can you go about facing those challenges in front of you and dealing with the root of the problem that you're seeing in front of you. So that's what I have for you today. I appreciate everyone listening to the Building Men podcast. Please shoot me an email if you have anything you want to talk about, if you need advice on something, you just want to share your story. It's buildingmencoach@gmail.com. Also, please follow me on Instagram. It's building.men. If you haven't done so already, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, if you wouldn't mind leaving me a 5-star rating and then write a review on the podcast, it helps other people find this podcast and listen to the message that we're trying to share with everyone out there. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on Building Men.